The galaxy's final hour. The galaxy was dying. One by one, the star systems fell into silence, consumed by the unstoppable enemy. The once vibrant worlds were now nothing but ashes, their people lost to the black void of space. The Alliance, made up of dozens of species, had tried everything. They had fought, they had bargained, and they had begged for peace. But nothing worked. The enemy was relentless. Every counterattack ended in defeat. Every attempt at negotiation was met with more destruction. The Council of the Galactic Nations held their final meeting in the deepest, most secure chambers of their headquarters. The room was dark, the air heavy with tension. All around the table, leaders from across the galaxy sat in silence, their faces worn from months of constant battle. They knew what was coming, but none of them had the courage to say it out loud. "You all know what has to happen," High Commander Zero said quietly, his voice hoarse from exhaustion. His eyes were hollow, his spirit broken. "We can't win. We don't have the resources. We don't have the power. The enemy is too strong. I don't see how we can stop them." A murmur of agreement spread across the room. No one argued. They had all tried. Their fleets were shattered. Their defenses were falling. The enemy had destroyed everything that stood in their way, and now they were coming for the last strongholds. "It's over," Counselor Tessa of the Regalian Empire whispered, her eyes downcast. "The last hope is gone." The silence in the room was suffocating. The thought of surrendering, of accepting their fate, hung in the air like a dark cloud. The galaxy was full of life, full of civilizations that had flourished for centuries. And now, all that was left was a faint hope that some would survive, even if it was in hiding. High Commander Zero stood up, his hands gripping the edge of the table. "We cannot give up. We must send out a final message. Maybe, just maybe, someone will hear us. Someone out there might still have the strength to fight." Counselor Tessa shook her head, her voice shaking. "There's no one left. We've sent out so many distress calls, and no one answered. The galaxy has turned its back on us." Zero's eyes flicked to the large monitor on the wall. The enemy fleet was moving closer, their massive ships darkening the stars. He knew they had only hours left. Hours before everything would be destroyed. But he wasn't ready to give up. Not yet. "We send one last message," he said with resolve. "We send it to anyone, anywhere. If there is even the slightest chance of salvation, we'll take it. We'll tell them. Help us. Please. We are the last of the free worlds." The council members were silent for a long time, but eventually, they nodded. It was a desperate, last-ditch attempt, but it was all they had left. They would do it. They would send a signal. Perhaps it was foolish. But what other choice did they have? One of the technicians in the back of the room began to work quickly, setting up the signal transmitter. The hum of machines filled the room as the final message was prepared for broadcast. Zorro watched, his heart pounding in his chest. This was it. If no one answered, it would be the end of everything. They would go down fighting, but the galaxy would remember them as nothing more than a footnote in history. The technician turned, a nervous look on his face. "The signal is ready, Commander. We can send it now." Zorro nodded, his hands trembling. He had seen war, seen death, seen destruction. But never had he felt the weight of it like he did now. They were sending out their last hope into the void, hoping that someone, anyone, would hear. The technician pressed a button, and the room went silent. The signal was sent. For a moment, there was nothing. Just the quiet hum of machinery, the distant sound of the enemy fleet getting closer. Then the screen blinked to life. A single message appeared on the monitor. A message from the deep void of space. At first, no one could believe what they were seeing. The message read, "Humanity is coming." The room fell completely still. The words echoed in the minds of every person there. Who were they? Where had they been? The humans had been thought to be lost forever. No one had heard from them in centuries. Their home world was abandoned. their once powerful fleet destroyed in the early days of the war. High Commander Zero stared at the screen, disbelief written across his face. Humanity. But they're gone. They were wiped out. Counselor Tessa stepped forward, her voice trembling. It can't be. They're gone. We lost contact with Earth hundreds of years ago. There's no way they can still be out there. But as she spoke, another message appeared on the screen. This one was brief, but clear. We are the last hope. We will not fail. Zero's heart skipped a beat. He had never heard a more determined message. Whoever had sent this signal, they weren't asking for help. They were offering it. They weren't hiding. They were coming. Tessa looked at Zero, her eyes wide. Do you think they could really be coming? After all this time? Zoro clenched his fists, a spark of hope flickering in his chest. I don't know, but we got to believe. We have to hold on just a little longer. The room was filled with silence, but for the first time in months, there was something else. Something that hadn't been there before. Hope. The battle for the galaxy wasn't over yet. Not as long as humanity was still out there, waiting to strike. Far away from the heart of the collapsing galaxy, on the quiet and abandoned world once called Earth, something ancient and forgotten began to stir. The planet, once full of life and technology, had become a shadow of its past, with empty cities, overgrown forests, and broken satellites still floating in orbit. It had been silent for centuries, its people believed to be gone, its war machines buried deep under dust and time. But now, deep beneath the planet's surface, something had heard the signal. In an underground control center, hidden far below what was once the North American continent, a single red light began to blink. The room was dark and covered in layers of dust. Machines, silent for generations, started to hum softly. Screens slowly came to life, showing maps, old alerts, and one new message flashing across every terminal. Distress signal detected. Alliance Code Omega. An ancient AI, named Core 7, slowly activated. Its systems scanned the galaxy and confirmed the horrifying truth. The enemy, known only in old records as the Swarm, had returned. They were moving fast, consuming entire worlds. And the signal had come from the last surviving members of the Galactic Alliance, those same species the humans had once fought beside long ago. Core 7 knew its purpose. Its only mission was to wake the sleeping giants, the last warriors of humanity. Deep below the Earth's surface, inside reinforced cryo chambers, the last human battle command was still frozen in time, waiting for the final call. With a loud echo through the long-forgotten halls, the system began the awakening sequence. Lights turned on one by one, revealing long rows of cryopods. Inside them lay warriors, engineers, pilots, and commanders, people who had once defended Earth during the darkest days. They were frozen not because they had lost, but because they had made a decision. If the galaxy ever needed them again, they would return. The first pod opened with a hiss. Out stepped Commander Jace Arlen, his body weak from centuries of sleep, but his mind already scanning the room for danger. He coughed hard, his breath ragged, but his eyes sharp. As the system fed him old data and new information, he realized what was happening. The galaxy was calling. They were losing. And once again, humanity was needed. One by one, the other pods began to open. Soldiers and leaders from different backgrounds stood up, confused at first, then serious as Core 7 shared what was happening. They had not been forgotten. They had been waiting. Earth was quiet now, but its heart still beat, and now it would rise again. Outside, on a flat mountain in the old American West, the ground cracked open. A massive steel door began to slide back, revealing a launch tunnel that led into the sky. From within, a massive object slowly began to rise. It was not just any ship. It was the Ark of Fury, the last human warship, built with advanced weapons and a powerful AI mind of its own. As the engines lit up, birds scattered, and dust filled the air. The ship roared to life, shaking the earth below it. Across the broken lands, old satellites powered up again. Old human technology began to respond. The planet, long thought dead, was waking up. Commander Arlen stood on the command bridge of the ship, his team behind him. The screen in front of him showed the final message from the Galactic Alliance. "Help us. We are the last. They are coming." Jace stared at the message, then nodded slowly. "They stood with us when Earth was falling. Now it's our turn. We fight not just for them, but for who we were and who we must become again." The ship's AI responded with a steady voice. "Coordinates locked. Enemy systems detected. Shall we engage?" Jace placed his hand on the control. "Engage. Let them know. The last hope has returned." And with a thunderous sound, the arc of fury blasted into the sky, leaving Earth behind as it headed toward the battlefield, ready to do what humanity did best: fight when all hope was gone. The arc of fury cut through space at incredible speed, its powerful engines leaving a trail of light behind it as it tore through the dark expanse of the galaxy. Commander Jace Arlen stood at the bridge, his eyes fixed on the star maps. The galaxy was a war zone. Every corner was filled with the sounds of battle, the echo of weapons, the screams of dying worlds, and the silent fear of defeat. But now, one ship, one force, was about to change everything. The ship was old, but it was still a symbol of humanity's power. Its metal exterior was scratched and scarred from centuries of disuse, but beneath that rust, it held the might of humanity's greatest weapon. Every section of the ship hummed with life. Its crew, though tired and stiff from their long sleep, had begun to warm up to the task. They had all trained for this day, the day when the galaxy would need them again. Jace looked out of the viewports, staring at the distant, swirling chaos of a battlefield. The enemy, the swarm, was vast, a terrifying force of insect-like creatures that consumed entire civilizations. Their ships were massive, each one built to destroy and enslave. They had already torn through countless worlds, leaving nothing but destruction in their wake. But as the Arc of Fury approached, their fleet was still focused on the remaining survivors of the Galactic Alliance. They had no idea that something else was coming, something they would never expect. On the bridge, the communications officer, Lieutenant Zara, was the first to spot the enemy. "Commander, we've entered their perimeter. They don't see us yet, but their fleet is massive. I count at least 5 main battle cruisers and dozens of smaller ships. They're all focusing on the Alliance forces. We're almost invisible to them." Chase nodded, his face hard. "That's good. Let's keep it that way for now. We don't need them to know we're here until we're in range." But just as he said it, the Arc of Fury's AI, a system known as Bastion, chimed in. "Enemy vessels are scanning. Cloaking will not hold much longer. Suggest immediate combat readiness." "Dame," Jace muttered under his breath. There was no time to waste. The Arc of Fury wasn't just a symbol of humanity. It was their weapon, and it was time to put it to use. He turned to the weapons officer. "Fire when ready." A bright flash erupted from the front of the ship. The Arc of Fury's main cannon fired, sending a beam of pure energy into the nearest enemy ship. The massive swarm cruiser didn't stand a chance. It cracked in half, its hull ripped apart by the sheer force of the shot. Explosions erupted across the battlefield as the other swarm ships, caught off guard, scrambled to respond. The battle had begun. But the swarm was not so easily defeated. Immediately, their ships turned to face the Arc of Fury, weapons charging. The enemy leader, a hulking insectoid creature known as Broger, growled in frustration. His large black eyes glowed with hatred as he watched the human warship tear into his fleet. This was no random group of survivors. These humans, who were supposed to be extinct, had come back with a vengeance. "This is impossible." Broger's voice rang out across his command ship. "We thought they were gone. Their planet is gone. How are they still alive? How can they still fight?" But despite the confusion, Broger was not one to back down. He roared orders to his fleet, and the swarm ships responded. They charged towards the Arc of Fury, their weapons locking on. The battlefield was about to turn into a brutal clash of firepower. Back on the human ship, the crew was ready. Jace's voice was calm, but there was a fire in his eyes. This is what we've been waiting for. We fight to win. They will learn that humanity doesn't go down without a fight. The Arc of Fury unleashed a second volley of fire, this time targeting multiple ships at once. The swarm's smaller vessels exploded into pieces, while the larger cruisers took heavy damage. The battle was chaos, but humanity's power had only just begun to show. Each strike, each move, was calculated, a precision that the swarm had not expected. On the battlefield, the remaining forces of the Galactic Alliance watched in disbelief. They had been losing for so long, their morale shattered by the relentless advance of the swarm. But now, as they saw the Arc of Fury tearing through the enemy lines, something inside them began to stir. Hope. It was small at first, but it grew. Humanity had returned. They had come to save them. A loud cheer rose from the Alliance forces. They were not alone. The humans were here. Commander Jace Arlen watched as the enemy ships began to retreat. It wasn't over yet. There was still a war to fight. But humanity had just delivered the first blow, and the swarm would now know they were not alone in this galaxy. They would never again be able to destroy in peace. But even as the battle raged, Jace knew this was just the beginning. There would be more battles, more enemies, but humanity had come to fight, and they would not stop. Not until every last enemy had been driven back, and the galaxy was safe once again. As the Arc of Fury continued to push forward, Jace looked out over the battlefield. It was only the start of something much bigger. The galaxy was still in danger, but now, for the first time in a long while, the tide had turned. Humanity had returned, and they would fight until the very end. The Arc of Fury hovered in the cold void of space, its massive form casting a shadow over the wreckage of the battle. The battlefield was scattered with debris, burned-out husks of swarm ships, their once mighty forms now reduced to twisted metal and smoldering ruins. The dark void was dotted with the remains of the enemy fleet, torn apart by the relentless power of humanity's last hope. Commander Jace Arlen stood at the bridge, his hands clasped behind his back. The battle had been fierce, but humanity's warship had shown no mercy. The Arc of Fury was still intact, though scared from the fight. The energy shields were holding, and the weapons systems had proven more than capable of piercing the swarm's once impenetrable defenses. But Jace's face was unreadable. Despite the victory, he knew this was only the beginning. The swarm wasn't going to stop. They had been forced to retreat, but the enemy wasn't one to give up easily. They would be back. And next time, they would bring more forces. Humanity had won the first fight, but the war was far from over. "We've sent them running," Zara, the communications officer, said, her voice tinged with relief. "Their ships are retreating. We've got them on the run." "Don't get comfortable," Jace replied, his voice calm but firm. "This isn't over. They'll regroup, and when they do, they'll come at us harder. We need to prepare for their return." The crew of the Arc of Fury was still recovering from the intense battle, but they knew their work was far from finished. They had just taken down a small part of the swarm's fleet. There were more ships, more weapons, and more enemies out there, ready to strike again. But something had changed. The retreat of the swarm wasn't just a victory for humanity. It was a message. The galaxy had been living in fear for far too long, under the crushing weight of the swarm's endless advance. But now, with the return of humanity's warship, the enemy knew they were not alone. There was something bigger, something more powerful, that had just entered the fight. Across the galaxy, the news spread like wildfire. The Galactic Alliance, once on the brink of total collapse, began to rally. They had seen the Arc of Fury in action. They had witnessed humanity's strength, and it reignited a spark of hope in their hearts. The swarm may have been retreating, But they knew it wasn't over yet. Humanity had brought the fight to the enemy, and that was enough to stir the flames of resistance in the hearts of everyone. On a distant world, a planet that had been under siege for months, the people saw the message flashing on their screens. Humanity has returned. The swarm is retreating. The battle is not over. The leaders of the Galactic Alliance gathered, watching the reports from the front lines. Their faces were grim, but a spark of hope had lit in their eyes. "We can win this," one of the generals said. "If the humans can fight like this, we have a chance." Meanwhile, the swarm's leader, Broger, stood in the remains of his command ship, his body shaking with fury. He had never anticipated that humanity would return in such force. They had been considered weak, primitive, and all but wiped out. But now his forces had been beaten, and the arc of fury had torn through his fleet with ease. How could they still be alive? Broger muttered, his anger boiling over. How could they have such power? This is impossible. He turned to his advisors, his mandibles clicking in frustration. "We need to regroup. We need to bring more ships, more warriors. The humans have shown they are not as weak as we thought. But this is only the beginning. We will crush them." His fleet had been pushed back, but it was far from destroyed. The swarm was vast, and their numbers were endless. Broger knew that they had the strength to return and finish what they had started. The humans' arrival had been a shock, but the swarm would adapt. They always did. On the Arc of Fury, Jace stood before the massive war map displayed on the main screen. The galaxy was still in chaos. The swarm's retreat was not an end, but a sign that the battle had only just begun. Humanity had fought back, and for the first time in a long time, the enemy was retreating. But Jace knew it would take more than just one ship to defeat the swarm. They needed allies, and they needed to strike again before the swarm could regroup. "We've won a battle," Jace said, his voice steady. "But the war is far from over. The swarm will be back. We need to strike at their heart before they have a chance to recover." Lieutenant Zara nodded. "What are you thinking, Commander?" "We go to their homeworld," Jace said. "We take the fight to them. If we can break their hold on their own world, we can finally end this. But we'll need every ally we can find. It's time to unite the galaxy." The crew of the Arc of Fury nodded in agreement. They had just fought the first battle, but they knew what was coming. The swarm wasn't done yet. They would return, and when they did, humanity would be ready. But this time, they would have the galaxy behind them. The Arc of Fury drifted slowly through the empty expanse of space, its systems now fully operational after the recent battle. The crew, though exhausted, were determined. There was no turning back now. Commander Jace Arlen stood before the war map in the briefing room, his fingers tracing the red lines that marked the swarm's path of destruction. The galaxy had been in chaos for far too long. But now, humanity had become the spark that could ignite a revolution. "We can't wait any longer," Jace said, his voice low but filled with resolve. "The swarm is gathering. They will strike back harder than before. If we wait for them to regroup, it could be too late. We need to take the fight to their homeworld now." The room was silent, the weight of his words sinking in. The crew knew the stakes were high. If they failed, the swarm could destroy the rest of the galaxy. But humanity had fought for centuries to survive, and they were not about to give up now. They were fighting for their future, for the future of every species the swarm had ever conquered. Lieutenant Zara stood up, her expression determined. "We've been contacting the Galactic Alliance. They're ready. We have a coalition of forces ready to join us. We'll have the strength we need." Jace nodded. "Good. We need every ship we can get. We go to the swarm's homeworld, strike fast, and hit them where it hurts. We cripple their power, and we force them to surrender." The Arc of Fury's engines powered up, sending a surge of energy through the ship. The massive warship, scared but proud, was ready for what was coming. All across the galaxy, the message had gone out. Humanity had returned. The swarm had been beaten back. Now, they were preparing for the final battle. The fleet of Allied ships was ready. From every corner of the galaxy, ships flew toward the swarm's homeworld. The Galactic Alliance was united in a way they had never been before. Each ship was a symbol of hope, each captain a leader determined to stop the enemy. It was a coalition of species that had once been divided by differences, but now they fought as one. Together, they would face the swarm, and together, they would win or die. Jace stood on the bridge, watching as the fleet assembled. The Ark of Fury was no longer just a ship. It was a symbol of humanity's defiance, a message to the galaxy that they would not be conquered. The human crew had faced impossible odds, but they had survived. Now, they would lead the charge into the heart of the swarm's empire. Zara turned to him, a sense of urgency in her eyes. "Commander, we're entering the swarm's space. Their forces are already moving. We can't afford to waste any time." Jace's hand tightened around the controls. "We won't. Prepare the fleet. We're going in." The Ark of Fury and the Allied ships moved into the swarm's space, the darkness of the void stretching out before them. Ahead, the swarm's homeworld loomed large, a dark planet surrounded by an armada of warships. The enemy had gathered every force they could muster, but they didn't know what was coming. The first wave of attacks came quickly. Swarm ships flew at the fleet with terrifying speed, their weapons flashing. The Ark of Fury fired back, its cannons tearing through the enemy ships. But there were too many. The swarm was relentless, pouring out from their homeworld like a swarm of locusts, their ships covering the sky. "Hold steady," Jace barked. "Don't let them break our lines. We need to get to their planet. That's where we end this." The fleet pressed forward, despite the overwhelming numbers. Each ship in the Allied forces was built for this moment. The battle raged on, the sky filled with explosions and the crackle of energy weapons. But humanity's forces were relentless. They fought not just for survival, but for the future of the galaxy. In the command room of the Ark of Fury, the team worked tirelessly to coordinate the attacks. Zara kept in constant communication with the fleet, while the tactical officers calculated the best approach. Every move had to be perfect. One mistake, and the swarm would crush them. "We're getting close," Zara reported. "We've broken through their defenses. It's time to strike." The Ark of Fury shifted into a new formation, flanking the enemy fleet, with the swarm's ships distracted by the incoming fire from the other Allied vessels. Humanity's flagship made a bold move. It darted forward, past the remaining defenses, and into the atmosphere of the enemy world. Jace's heart pounded as he gave the order to deploy the final strike. "This is it. All ships, prepare for the final assault. We hit them hard, and we hit them now." The Ark of Fury and its allies descended toward the swarm's planet, weapons primed. The ground below was a twisted mess of factories and military installations, the planet's surface scarred by years of war. The swarm had used it as their base of operations, but now it would be their downfall. As the human fleet closed in, the sky above the planet erupted in a massive explosion. The Ark of Fury's main cannon fired, sending a beam of concentrated energy into the swarm's main capital building. The building crumbled under the blast, and with it, the heart of the swarm's leadership. The planet began to shake, as if in response to the attack. The swarm's forces, now leaderless and disorganized, faltered. It was a critical blow. The fight was far from over, but this was the moment that would change everything. The swarm had been knocked to the brink of defeat. The fleet continued to bombard the planet, sending wave after wave of devastating strikes. The swarm's forces struggled to retaliate. Their once imposing fleet was now crumbling under the assault. The end was near. Jace looked out at the planet, his face set in determination. "We're not finished yet," he muttered. "We finish this here."